Hey everyone, in this video we're going to be taking a melody and adding a harmonization to it that also utilizes secondary dominance. Here I have the melody to Ein Festeburg ist unser Gott, which is a Baroque era chorale tune written by Martin Luther. So it sounds, the first two phrases sound like this. There's our first cadence. There's our second cadence. So I'm going to go ahead and write in cadence there. I'm going to write in cadence here. So we know that those are 2 points that we want to head towards. Okay, so in looking at those cadences, we can decide what sorts of cadences that we want. Here, I think I will want a half cadence. And this is a good thing to do first, to identify what cadence we want so that we can work around that. We know where we want to head. And here, I actually, I'm going to be weird. I'm going to do a deceptive cadence here. It's set up so that it could be a perfect authentic cadence, but to get the most out of our experimentation here with secondary dominance, I think this is going to be the way to go. So, first, let's go ahead and make sure that we know where, what chords that we want there at those cadences. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm just going to put in a couple of rests here in the bass voice. And I know that we're going to want a G, and maybe it can be either of these Gs. I'm just putting those in as notes right now. And then for a deceptive cadence here, we're going to want to have an A somewhere in the bass voice. So that'll give us the cadences that we want. Now what I want to do is create just a basic framework. I know probably that, so a basic harmonic framework, that is, so that we can play around with some harmonies to go here. So I know since we're in C major here, that we should probably start on a 1 chord. So that should probably be 1. And that tonic chord could last for a little while. Then we start getting G and B, so this could probably be a 5. And now here, as we approach the half cadence, here's where we could maybe add in a secondary dominant. So we know that this chord here is going to be 5, so perhaps we could add in a 5 of 5 beforehand. So I'm thinking that this is going to be a dominant. We'll add in a dominant of the dominant. So if we think of G, which is our 5 chord here, G, B, D, we think about what the dominant of that chord is. So the dominant of that chord is a D major chord, D, F sharp, A. The dominant of G is D major. And that does actually work here with this pitch. There we go, D, F sharp, A. So we know that that's going to be, that A will function in there. So we're going to go ahead and make a note that we want 5 of 5 here. I'll go ahead and move this note down here. And so leading up to that, we could have a variety of things. We could, of course, have a 4 chord. 4 could move, we could move 4 to 5 of 5 to 5. Remember that secondary dominants usually are going to come between 2 progressions that would otherwise be functional. So 4 moves to 5, so we could add a 5 of 5 in between there, and that would be fine. That would sound like this. So if we're in C major, here's the 4 chord, here's 5 of 5, and here's 5. Now, the one issue here is that 5 over here usually doesn't move to 4. It does sometimes, but in this style it tends to not. So perhaps maybe instead we could go 5 to 6. That might work well. And we can still have the 5 of 5 there because 6 still goes back to 5, and that's okay. That's a tonic class chord moving to a dominant class chord. And then we could add in that 5 of 5 right there. So we could have this as our basic framework. That sounds pretty good. That works well. Now, because we're at the half cadence, we can play around with the harmonies. Maybe here we could move back to 4. Remember, some of those rules are loosened a little bit at a half cadence. So one possibility is we could go to 4, then 5. Maybe we could even go to 6 here. So 4 being FAC would harmonize with that pitch up top, and then 5 would harmonize with the B at the start of measure 3, and then 6 would harmonize with the A on the second beat. And then perhaps we could do an E minor chord to harmonize with that G. That could be 3. Perhaps go back to 4 for that last beat. So we have now 4, 5, 6, 3, 4. Now perhaps we go to a 5 on the downbeat to lead to our deceptive cadence. 5, but here is where I want to play around. I want to add some secondary dominance. So I know that I'm heading to 6 here. So instead of moving just straight to a 6 from a 5 chord, which would be fine, I want to intensify that a little bit. Let's instead do 5 of 6. Now remember, this is just fine and idiomatic because 5 usually does move to 6. So if we add a tonicization in the mix, then that's okay. Here's 5 of 6. That's nice and crunchy. And of course, because there's a D here, that would be a 7th. And the reason I know that is because I can think of our 6th chord, A, C, E. I think of the dominant of our 6th chord, which is E, G sharp, B. And if we add a D on that, that's our chordal 7th. So there's our 5, 7 of 6. So here's a basic framework that we could be working with. That sounds pretty good. Now, I'm a little bit less than convinced of this 5 going to 4, so I think I'm going to adjust that. Maybe we'll go just back to 1, and that's okay. The other thing that I'm wondering is there another way that we can get in another secondary dominant? And the one that I'm thinking of is maybe we could tonicize this 4 chord here. Because this G right here, I'm thinking, well, could that be used as part of a secondary dominant? And I think it could. In fact, let's think of our 4 chord, and let's think of what the dominant of our 4 chord is. So our 4 chord is F, A, C. The dominant of the 4 chord would be C, E, G. Now, C, E, G is just our 1 chord, so how do we know it would be the dominant? Well, we could add the B flat to it. We could add the 7th. So perhaps we could make this 3 instead into a 5, 7 of 4. Let's see what that sounds like. Hey, that's starting to sound pretty good. So there's some extra crunch that that's coming there. So let's go ahead and go backwards and start to fill some of this in. Let's go ahead and start with the bass voice. So we could have C, C, C. That's a little repetitive. We might change that later. Now we could do 2 G's for a root position 5. Go up to a 6. The A for a 6. Next we want 5 of 5. So remember that's D, F sharp, A. Let's go ahead and stick with root position chords for now. We can change things up later. And we add a D right there. And then we arrive at the 5. Then we were heading towards a 1. So we'll go there. Back up to a 5. Then a 6. Then we had 5, 7 of 4. So it's going to be C, back to a 4, and then we had G for our 5 chord and E for our 5, 7 of 6. So we've used all root position chords now, and we're going to see if we want to change that up. So here's 1, 1, 1, then 5, then 6, 5 of 5, 5, then to 1, 1, 5, 6, 5, 7 of 4, 4, 5, 5, 7 of 6 to 6. Now some of these I see a couple of issues with. For instance, we've gone from this root position 5 to a root position 1, and that 5 to 1 motion mirrors this 5 to 1 motion in the soprano voice. So we create some parallel octaves there. And even if we had used this uppermost G, we'd have octaves by contrary motion. So I think what I'd like to do to stay a little bit more stylistic is I'll probably have this be a first inversion chord. So I'm going to change that to a 1-6. Now there is some latitude, some flexibility after cadences. Sometimes you will see some parallel motion, but I'm just trying to be sort of true to the style and move away from that. So we'll have a 1-6 there. 1-6 moving to 5 is just fine, and then going to 6. Now, one thing that I'm thinking is that's the leap of the 6th scale degree down to scale degree 1 for the 5, 7 of 4. That seems kind of a big leap. And I'm thinking maybe we could also have a first inversion chord here. That makes the voice leading a little bit smoother. So there's our, we'll change that instead to a 5, 6, 5 of 4. And then that will go nicely to that 4 chord. Then to our 5, 7, then our 5, 7 of 6 to 6. The other thing that I'm thinking is, well, what if this 5 to 5, 7 of 6 motion, what if we made that smoother too? Could this be a first inversion chord? There's nothing wrong with it being root position, but maybe we could have some chromatic motion there. That sounds quite expressive, and I kind of like it. Now we may have to adjust a little something later, but when we add some more voices, but for right now, let's go ahead and keep this idea. We'll do 5, 6, 5 of 6. All right, then let's head over here to the beginning. We have these 3 1 chords in a row. It's a little boring. Maybe what I'll do is I'll do 1 to 1, 6, and then 1. I think actually this is how Bach harmonized it. So that's probably in my head. But it seems like a good idea. It gives us a little bit of variety. Just a little bit of motion there. Now the other thing that I'm thinking is those 2 5s in a row also seem a little boring. And one thing that I see here is the possibility we move G A B. We move a third there in the soprano voice, G A B. I'm thinking, what if we reverse that? What if we started with a 5-6 chord and went backwards? Then we could have a little voice exchange with the bass voice going B, A, G, and the soprano voice going G, A, B. So those going in contrary motion could create a nice little effect. Then we'd probably want to bring our next 6 down an octave. We don't want to leap up from that low G up to the high A. So we'll bring that down the octave. There we go. We've got some nice motion set up here. I hear that going down to the G rather than up to the G, so we'll do that. And then there we go. So let's start filling some things in and see where that takes us. Let's begin by adding in an alto voice. I'll start like this so that we have some exchanges in between the bass voice and the alto voice. That seems the best way to handle that so that we don't double the thirds. And we'll go ahead and do this. We correct the stems in the lower voice so we don't get confused. There we go. So, and we'll just keep the tenor voice on G. So I think this is the simplest way to voice lead this beginning. Now I think keeping the G here makes sense. Excuse me, wrong voice. Keeping the G in the tenor voice makes a lot of sense. If we can keep it simple, we probably should. In the alto voice then, that means we would go down to a D. And there we'd have complete chords. All right. There we go. Everything works nicely. Those A's act as passing tones that are consonant with each other. We'll talk about adding in some other tones in the mix. Now, whenever we have a progression that goes from 5 to 6, it's okay and in fact preferable to double the third. So I think that's what I will do in the alto voice. I will double that third right there. The third of the chord, that is. That A. Now we could go, in the tenor voice, we could go G up to A, but then we'd have parallel octaves. Those octave Gs going to the octave As. So let's avoid that. Instead, let's go down to an E. I think that'll work well. Let's go ahead and lower those. So we have that G moving to the 6th chord. Now we have going to 5 of 5. So we need a D, an F sharp, and an A. So that tenor voice looks ripe to go right up to an F sharp. Just go up by step, and then that F sharp will want to resolve up to a G. Excellent. There we are. And then we have a 1/6 chord next. I'm just going to keep that G right there. Let's see if that voice leading works. If it can be smooth and simple, that will work well. Now, speaking of smooth and simple, let's see if we can keep that C here. If we keep the C, we'd have a 5/7 of 5. That would be absolutely fine. That C, the chordal 7th, will want to resolve down to the 3rd of the next chord. The chordal 7th almost always wants to resolve downwards. There we are. And then can just simply resolve up a step to that C. There we go. Then we've got some nice, we've got doubled root right here, just 1/3. We have tripled root right here, which is just fine, and a third. The 5th is left out. That's absolutely okay. And then everything moves accordingly here. So let's go ahead and hear what this sounds like so far. There's our half cadence. Now we move onwards to that 1/6. We go to a 5. So let's see what we can do here. The alto could move up to a D. And then we want the we want this to go down probably to a C before going to a B for that. Actually, that would be a B flat. That's going to be our 5/6/5 of 4. And here we could go to the A. We'd end up doubling the 3rd there. So here we're going to break a rule. Break a tendency, and that 7th of the chord is going to resolve upwards so that we have the A. We're going to avoid the doubled 3rd that way, which is a little bit out of style. So here is the alto voice moving in nice parallel 6ths with the soprano for the most part. And I think that will do. So let's go ahead and now add in the tenor voice. Now, we could go like this. We could go G, A for the tenor, but then we'd be duplicating what the bass does. We'd have parallel unisons. We want to avoid that. So maybe what we're going to do is, we might break another rule here, because remember, a lot of these are very flexible, but in general, we want to avoid those parallel perfect intervals. So instead, let's go ahead and maybe double the third here in that 5 chord, which isn't as bad as it sounds because that will allow us to go up to an up to a C, which doubles the third of that 6 chord, which we talked about was actually preferable when we go from 5 to 6. Doubling the third of the 6 chord allows us to have the doubling of the tonic, which gives us the illusion that we've resolved correctly. Now, we could continue to do a little bit of flexibility with the rules here, or the idiomatic tendencies. And we're going to keep a C in these places here. So what I've done here, and we're going to go back, we might go back and edit this a little bit. This is just a rough draft. See, I've got the C in the tenor voice above the B flat in the alto. That's a little bit out of style. So it doesn't quite, because we have a crossing of the voices. Now, Bach does do this a lot, but it's good to note, it's good to be able to avoid that if we can. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually just going to switch out what these voices did. So the alto is just going to have a C and then a C. And the tenor is going to go down to the B flat. And then that B flat, I'm actually going to have resolved to the A. I know we were trying to avoid that doubled third, but it's just there for a second. I want to keep that in my ear. So here we are from after the half cadence. There we go. That's working okay now. Now we need to go on to the 5 chord. And here we go. Let's see what happens here. Let's start with the alto voice. Now I want to go to a B here. And then I'm going to double that C. Because again, we have that doubled third in the deceptive cadence, and that's fine. Now you might be saying to me, now hold on a second. We've got a C and a G going to a B and an F. Those are 2 fifths in a row, right? Well, in this case, it's okay. We've got a perfect fifth, C to G, and we have a diminished fifth, B to F. So we actually have unequal fifths, and that's okay as long as it involves an inner voice. We want to avoid unequal fifths in outer voices, but in inner voices, that's fine. Now, the other thing that I'm seeing here is that pretty soon I'm not going to be able to have a complete 5-6-5 of 6 chord here because I'm running out of space. I have no space for the E. So if I want to do that, maybe what I'm going to need to do is jump down. There'll be a large leap from what the bass voice was doing, E, F, down to a G, G sharp, A. It is a large leap, but in this case, it's kind of idiomatic because it is a large leap that's approached by step. We leap in the opposite direction, and then we move by step again. So when we talk about rules for counterpoint, we'll see that that is actually something that works idiomatically. It is a little bit tricky, but I think we'll be able to handle it for now. So let's see what happens next. Where will our harmonic perambulations lead us? So I'm going to go next. I think that this A should go down to a G. There'll be a little bit of a dissonance here as we have some parallel sevenths. Those aren't super common, but they do crop up sometimes, especially when we have some non-harmonic tones in the mix. Now we've got 2 options here that I see. We could go down to the E here, and then have that E stay. I'll go ahead and get rid of that upper A that we no longer need because we're not doing that. So we have here the pickup to the last bar. That works pretty well. I'm wondering though, what if we made it even just a little bit more angsty? What if instead of a 5-6-5 of 6, what if we moved this tenor voice down by step? So we're going to go G to F natural to E. change the chord, it would still be tonicizing 6, but rather than a 5-6-5 of 6, we have G sharp, B, D, F natural. We have a fully diminished 7th chord. We have a fully diminished 7-7 of 6. And that works just as well too. It's still tonicizing 6. 5, the outer chords around it are still working functionally. 5 going to 6. This just emphasizes that motion. Makes it very sort of poignant, I think. All right, so here we are. Here's what we have so far. Excuse me. All right, that works pretty well. Now, there's one or two places where I see we could add in some non-chord tones. And I am a sucker for non-chord tones, so I think we should do it. So one of the places we can look to add in non-chord tones is wherever we see voices separated by thirds. Those are going to be ripe for adding in some passing tones. So let's go ahead and find some. Well, here's some right here, the 1-6 up to 5. Now, we could go ahead and add in here, we could go G, A, up to B. That's some nice stepwise motion, so that we'd have this. And if we wanted to, we could actually add in one down here in the bass voice. I'm going to add a courtesy accidental so we know that's a natural. So, actually creates for a moment the sensation of a 4 chord in there. So you could analyze that either that is passing tones in the context of 1-6 or a very brief 4 chord. But either way, it moves nicely to the 5. This is where we see that intersection of both voice leading and harmonic progression, how the two inform each other and come out of each other. There's another spot, maybe this is adding too many, but we could add some here between these two voices. That might make things interesting. That gives us a nice motive. Then we have some eighth notes. We have some eighth notes moving around on the strong beats. And 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 1 and 2, cadence. So that could work well. So there's one other spot that I see could use a non-chord tone. And that's going to be right in this tenor voice here. I'm actually wondering if we could add in a neighbor tone. It would create for just a second a sort of passing 6-4 chord here. That G to F natural, though, feels a little weird. Because we're going from 5 to 2 to 5. That would be the sort of feeling that I would get. So maybe we start tonicizing the dominant here. What if we add a chromatic neighbor tone? Maybe that's a little bit too much, but it's a possibility. Notice in each of these cases, the non-chord tones are always consonant with each other when we have multiple non-chord tones occurring. So these Ds are consonant with each other, they're octaves. Here, this F and the A are consonant with each other, they're thirds. So whenever you add multiple non-chord tones that are occurring at the same time, try to make them consonant with each other, even if they're dissonant with the chord that's around them. All right, so this gives us, we just started with a melody, the Ein Festeburg melody. We then added a basic framework, a basic harmonic framework, with a couple secondary dominants. We then filled in the voices and then added non-chord tones. progression that sounds more or less in the idiom that we are studying. So I think that this is a good way to go about this if you are looking to harmonize a melody using secondary dominants. First, try to find where you want cadences to occur. Then see if there are some spots that where you could harmonize with some secondary dominants that would work functionally. And then start adding in the rest of the chords. And finally, finish things off by adding in some nice, happy non-chord tones. Happy composing!